The phone rang at 3:47 a.m. London time, jarring me from the first peaceful sleep I'd had in months. When I saw the caller ID, my blood turned to ice. Mrs. Chioma. The voice was crisp, formal, speaking English with that unmistakable accent. This is Mrs. Park, Seo Jun's mother. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. 10 years. 10 years of silence, and now she was calling in the middle of the night. What do you want? My voice came out stronger than I felt. Your sons, she said without preamble, they have rights. Legal rights to their father's inheritance. The company lawyers have made this very clear. I gripped the phone tighter. My sons are fine without. The board is asking questions, Mrs. Chioma. Questions about legitimate heirs. There are complications with the business that require immediate family involvement. Something cold settled in my stomach. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was about damage control. Before I tell you why a woman who once called me unsuitable was suddenly concerned about my children's inheritance, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Subscribe to Mystic Tale by Luna, because some family secrets are too dangerous to ignore. I hung up without another word, but sleep was impossible after that. In the morning, I found Kem and Tund at the kitchen table, practicing their morning routine before school. At 10 years old, they moved with that special twin synchronization, finishing each other's sentences, sharing secret glances that held entire conversations. Good morning, Mama, they chorused in English, then switched to their careful morning greeting in their father's language, the words they'd learned from YouTube videos and Mr. Park down the street. My heart clenched watching them. They practiced every day, hoping. Always hoping for a father who'd chosen his family's approval over their existence. Are you okay, Mama? Tund asked, his perception sharp as always. You look worried. I forced a smile, smoothing his unruly hair that reminded me so painfully of Seo Jun, just tired, baby. Eat your breakfast. But as they gathered their school bags, chattering about their day ahead, I couldn't shake the feeling that our carefully built peace was about to shatter. Again. At work, I tried to focus on my pediatric patients, but my mind kept drifting to that phone call. Why now? What had changed? During my lunch break, I made a mistake I'd avoided for 10 years. I Googled Hanwol Tech. The results made my hands shake. The first headline hit me like a physical blow: Hanwol Tech heir scandal, anonymous source claims CEO's secret children. I clicked with trembling fingers. There, plastered across a Korean gossip website, were photos I'd never seen before. Security camera footage from our visit to Seoul 6 months ago. My sons' faces, clear as day, walking through that marble lobby. The article was in that language I barely understood, but the comments were translated automatically. Hundreds of them. Some cruel, some curious, all dissecting my children's faces, comparing them to corporate headshots of their father. Definitely his sons. Look at the jawline. Mixed children, what was he thinking? Company scandal brewing. I slammed the laptop shut, my breath coming in short gasps. They didn't call because they missed us. They didn't call because 10 years had changed their hearts. They called because someone had leaked our story, and now the whole country was watching. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Chioma, this is Seo Jun. We need to talk. It's about the boys' safety. Safety. The words sent ice through my veins. Another text arrived with a link to a different article. This one in English: Corporate Inheritance Crisis Rocks Korean Tech Giant. I clicked despite myself. The article detailed a hostile takeover attempt, stock prices falling, and speculation about illegitimate heirs affecting company stability. But it was the final paragraph that made my world tilt. Sources close to the Park family suggest a resolution is imminent, involving the acknowledgement of previously unknown family members who may have legal claims to the company inheritance. My sons weren't just viral gossip anymore. They were corporate assets. I left work early, my hands shaking as I drove to their school. How do you explain to 10-year-old children that they've become pawns in a game they never asked to play? When I picked them up, they were unusually quiet in the car. "Mama," Kem said finally, his voice small. "Some kids at school showed us pictures on their phones. Pictures of us in that big building in Seoul." My heart stopped. "What kind of pictures?" "They said we're famous now," Tund added. "But not the good kind." I pulled over, turning to face my beautiful, innocent sons who were learning too young that the world wasn't always kind to children caught between cultures. "Listen to me," I said, taking both their hands. "Whatever happens next, whatever people say, you remember who you are. You are brilliant, kind, strong boys. You are Nigerian and proud of it. You are also your father's sons, whether his family accepts that or not." But even as I said the words, I knew everything was about to change. The phone calls would keep coming. The media attention would grow. And somewhere in Seoul, powerful people were making decisions about my children's future without us. That night, I found them in their room, huddled together over Kem's tablet, reading translated comments about themselves. "They're not all bad, Mama," Tun said, showing me supportive messages mixed in with the cruel ones. "Some people think we're brave." Brave. My 10-year-old sons, processing international scrutiny with more grace than most adults. I tucked them in, kissing their foreheads, and made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, I was calling Seoul back. This time, we were going to face this storm together. The flight to Seoul felt like traveling backward through time. 6 months ago, we'd made this same journey full of hope and nervous excitement. Now the cabin felt suffocating with unspoken dread. Kem pressed his face to the window as we descended, pointing out landmarks he remembered from our previous visit. "Look, Mama, there's the river we walked by with Father." Tund pulled out the small notebook where he'd been practicing formal greetings. "Do you think Grandmother will be happy to see us this time?" I couldn't answer that. Not honestly. The memory hit me without warning, sharp and vivid. 6 months earlier, standing in this same airport, watching Seo Jun's face light up when he saw his sons running toward him. "My boys," he'd whispered, dropping to his knees to embrace them both. "I've missed you every single day." That first week had felt like a fairy tale. He'd taken time off work, something I'd never seen him do in London. We'd explored the city together, a real family for the first time. The boys had been enchanted by everything. Street food vendors who smiled at their enthusiasm. Traditional markets where Seo Jun taught them to bargain in his language. Temple visits where they bowed with perfect solemnity. "This is where your ancestors prayed," he told them at one ancient shrine. "You carry their strength in your blood." Kem had looked up at him with shining eyes. "Really, Father? We're connected to all of this?" "Forever," Seo Jun had promised. "No matter what happens, you belong here." Those words felt like lies now. The car ride from the airport was tense with anticipation. Seo Jun had sent his driver, the same elderly man who'd been kind to us before. He kept glancing at us in the rearview mirror with worried eyes. "The family is waiting," he said in careful English. "They prepared a special dinner." Special. The word carried weight I didn't trust. We pulled up to an elegant restaurant in Gangnam, the kind of place where business deals were made over elaborate meals. Through the windows, I could see a private dining room filled with people. "How many family members are there?" Tund asked, counting heads through the glass. "More than last time," Kem observed quietly. My protective instincts flared. This wasn't an intimate family dinner. This was a production. Inside, the introductions felt choreographed. Seo Jun's mother led the presentations with formal precision, introducing cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends we'd never met. Each person bowed politely to me, then studied my sons with barely concealed curiosity. I watched their eyes move from the boys' faces to their fathers, calculating resemblances, measuring worthiness. "They speak our language well?" asked an elderly uncle, addressing me instead of the twins directly. "Why don't you ask them yourself?" I suggested, my voice cooler than intended. Kem stepped forward with perfect posture. "Yes, sir. We've been studying for 4 years. We know about ancestors and respect and family honor." The uncle's eyebrows rose in surprise. Around the table, conversations paused as people turned to listen. Tund added, "We also know traditional games and festivals. Father taught us the meaning of respect for elders during our last visit." Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. But I noticed the expressions weren't entirely positive. Some faces showed something that looked like discomfort, as if the boys were performing too well. Dinner was an elaborate affair. Dish after dish arrived, each explained by different family members. The boys ate politely, using chopsticks with practiced ease, asking appropriate questions about ingredients and preparation. "They have good manners," Seo Jun's aunt observed to his mother. "Better than I expected." "Better than expected." The casual insult hit like a slap. "Their mother raised them well," Seo Jun said firmly, his jaw tight. His mother smiled thinly. "Yes, we can see that. But there are still gaps in their education that need addressing." "What kind of gaps?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Cultural understanding goes deeper than language and customs," she replied. "It's about belonging to something larger than yourself. Understanding your place in the family structure." The conversation felt like walking through a minefield. Every exchange carried hidden meanings, subtle corrections, gentle dismissals wrapped in polite language. "They'll need proper tutoring if they're to truly understand their heritage," another relative suggested. "There are schools that specialize in situations like this." Situations like this. My mixed-race sons were a situation to be managed. I caught Seo Jun's eye across the table. He looked uncomfortable but said nothing. That silence spoke volumes. After dinner, the adults gathered in the main dining area while the children were sent to play in an adjoining room. Through the glass partition, I could see my sons interacting with their cousins, trying to fit in with children who shared their blood but not their experience. The conversation around me turned to business. Stock prices, board meetings, competitor strategies. I was included but not truly involved, a polite observer to discussions that apparently affected my children's future. "The inheritance question needs resolution," one of the uncles was saying. "The lawyers are very clear about legitimate claims." "Of course," Seo Jun's mother replied. "But legitimacy involves more than just biology. It requires proper cultural foundation, family commitment, understanding of responsibility." Each word felt like a test my sons were failing simply by existing. "They're good boys," Seo Jun said quietly. "Smart, respectful, eager to learn. No one questions that," his mother replied smoothly. "But are they prepared for what being part of this family truly means? The expectations, the obligations, the sacrifices required?" I looked through the glass at my sons, watching them try so hard to belong. Kem was teaching a cousin some word game, patient and kind. Tund was listening intently to stories about school life in Seoul, asking thoughtful questions. They deserved better than this conditional acceptance. "Perhaps we should discuss this more privately," Seo Jun's mother suggested, her eyes moving meaningfully toward the children's room. The adults began filing toward a smaller private space. As we moved, I overheard two aunts speaking in rapid conversation, thinking I couldn't understand. But I caught enough words to make my blood freeze. "Fix them. Proper education. Remove the foreign influences. They weren't talking about cultural tutoring. They were talking about erasing half of who my sons were. In the private room, the masks finally came off. The conversation became direct, strategic, businesslike. The boys can be acknowledged, Seo Jun's father announced. But there will be conditions. I stood straighter. What kind of conditions? They would need to live here. Attend proper schools. Learn to conduct themselves as family heirs should. And their mother? Seo Jun asked, his voice carefully neutral. Would be welcome to visit, his mother replied. Regularly, of course. The room went silent except for the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. Visit. They wanted to take my children and let me visit them. That's not happening, I said quietly. Mrs. Chioma, Seo Jun's mother continued as if I hadn't spoken. You must understand. These boys are potentially heirs to significant wealth and responsibility. They need proper preparation. They have proper preparation. They have love, education, strong moral foundation, and pride in both sides of their heritage. But do they have the cultural grounding to handle corporate responsibility? The language skills for international business? The social connections necessary for success in our society? Each question felt like an attack on my parenting, my culture, my worth as their mother. If you're feeling that same shock I felt, subscribe to Mystic Tale by Luna. Because what happened next changed everything we thought we knew about family, love, and the choices we make to protect the people we love most. I looked at Seo Jun, waiting for him to defend us. To say something that showed he understood what his family was really asking. Instead, he looked down at his hands and said nothing. That silence told me everything I needed to know. The silence stretched until I couldn't bear it anymore. Seo Jun, say something. He finally looked up, his face pale and strained. Maybe we should consider what's best for the boy's future. The words hit me like a physical blow. After everything we'd been through, he was actually considering his family's proposal. What's best for them is staying with their mother, I said, my voice shaking with barely controlled fury. But the opportunities here, his mother interjected smoothly. The education, the connections, the cultural foundation they need. They have cultural foundation. They're Nigerian. They're proud of it. They don't need to be fixed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Several relatives exchanged glances that spoke volumes. No one said anything about fixing, Seo Jun's father said carefully. We're talking about completing their education. Giving them advantages they can't get elsewhere. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. Where are my sons? Through the glass partition, I could see the children's area was empty. Panic shot through me like lightning. Where are they? I demanded, my voice rising. They went upstairs with the other children, one of the aunts said dismissively. To see the traditional clothing display. It's educational. Something cold settled in my stomach. I pushed past the adults and headed for the stairs, ignoring their protests behind me. On the second floor, I found them in a private room, surrounded by adult relatives I'd barely been introduced to. My sons were dressed in elaborate traditional outfits, posing for photos while adults positioned them and gave directions. Stand straighter, Kem. Tund, bow deeper. Remember, you're representing the family now. They looked beautiful in the traditional clothes, but their faces showed confusion and discomfort. This wasn't cultural appreciation. This was performance. What's going on here? I asked sharply. An elderly woman I didn't recognize smiled brightly. Just taking some photos for the family records. The boys look so handsome in proper traditional wear. Family records? I stepped closer to my sons, who immediately moved toward me. For the announcement, she continued cheerfully. When the family acknowledges them officially, we'll want proper documentation. My blood turned to ice. What announcement? Footsteps on the stairs announced Seo Jun's arrival with his parents trailing behind. His face was grim, his mother's expression carefully neutral. Chioma, we can explain, he started. Explain what? That you've been planning some kind of public announcement without consulting me? That you've been treating my children like props for your family photos? The boys pressed closer to me, sensing the tension but not understanding its full meaning. Mama, Kem whispered. They said we were going to be on television. Is that true? Television. My heart started racing. What television? I demanded. Seo Jun's mother stepped forward with that infuriatingly calm smile. There's a family interview scheduled for tomorrow. A respected news program. Very dignified, very appropriate for introducing the boys to society. You scheduled a television interview about my children without asking me? We thought you'd be pleased, his father said. It's positive coverage. It shows the family embracing modern values, accepting diversity. Accepting diversity. Like my sons were some kind of charitable cause. The boys don't want to be on television, I said flatly. Actually, Mama, Tun said quietly, we said we'd think about it. They said it would help other mixed families feel accepted. The manipulation was breathtaking. They'd presented this to my innocent children as an act of service, a way to help others like them. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely form words. Have you ever felt that moment when everything you believe just shatters? Tell me in the comments, because right now, I need to know I'm not the only one who's been this afraid. Get them out of those clothes, I said, my voice deadly quiet. We're leaving. Chioma, please, Seo Jun said desperately. Let's talk about this rationally. Rationally? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean the way you all rationally planned my children's media debut without consulting their mother? The relatives in the room started murmuring among themselves, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation but reluctant to leave. Boys, I said firmly. Change back into your regular clothes. Now. They hesitated, looking between me and their father, caught in the middle of a battle they didn't understand. Mama's right, Kem said finally. We should have talked about this together first. But they said it would help father's business, Tund added, his voice small. They said the interview would show that his family accepts everyone. The innocent trust in his voice broke my heart. They'd been told they were helping, that their public display would serve some greater good. You used them, I said, looking directly at Seo Jun, you used our children to solve your corporate image problem. His face crumpled. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you brought us here to parade your sons in front of cameras so the world can see how progressive your family has become. The company needs this, his mother said sharply, dropping her pretense of politeness. The stockholders are nervous about the inheritance situation. Positive media coverage will stabilize the market. There it was. The truth finally spoken aloud. My sons are not marketing tools, I said. They're heirs to $1 billion company, his father shot back. They have responsibilities whether you like it or not. They're 10 years old. The shouting had drawn attention from other diners. Through the windows, I could see people in the main restaurant looking up toward our floor with curiosity. Kem tugged on my sleeve. Mama, why is everyone so angry? How do you explain to a child that adults are fighting over their right to exist? That their very presence has created a crisis requiring public relations solutions? Because sometimes adults forget what's really important, I said, kneeling down to his level. What's really important? Tund asked, moving closer. You. Your brother. Your happiness and safety and right to choose your own future. Seo Jun stepped forward. That's what we're trying to give them. A future. No, I said, standing back up. You're trying to give them your family's version of a future. There's a difference. The room fell silent except for the distant sounds of dinner service downstairs. If they do the interview, his mother said quietly, the inheritance is secured. No one can question their legitimacy. And if they don't? Her smile was cold. Then they remain what they've always been. Outside the family. Outside the protection that comes with official recognition. The threat was barely veiled. Comply or remain outcasts. I looked at my sons, still dressed in their elaborate traditional outfits, their faces showing the first real understanding that this wasn't just about cultural pride. This was about power and money and using children as pawns in adult games. Take off those clothes, I repeated firmly. We're going back to the hotel. Chioma, Seo-jun said desperately. The interview is tomorrow morning. The cameras are already scheduled. Then you'll have to cancel them. I can't. The whole board is expecting this. The media has been promised exclusive access. I stared at him, seeing clearly for perhaps the first time. You never intended to give us a choice, did you? This whole dinner, this whole reunion, it was all leading to tomorrow's performance. He couldn't meet my eyes. You brought us here to use us, I continued. To solve your family's public relations crisis by showing off your mixed-race sons like some kind of diversity trophy. That's not. That's exactly what this is. The boys had quietly changed back into their regular clothes, folding the traditional outfits with careful respect. Even angry, even hurt, they showed more dignity than the adults in the room. Are we really leaving, Mama? Kem asked. I looked around the room at faces that showed disappointment, frustration, and barely concealed anger. Not one person looked ashamed of what they'd planned. Not one person seemed to understand why I was upset. Except Seo-jun, whose face showed the dawning realization of what he'd lost. Yes, baby. We're leaving. What about the television? Tund asked. Won't people be disappointed if we don't help? The only people you need to worry about helping are yourselves, I said firmly. And sometimes helping yourself means walking away from people who want to use you. As we headed for the stairs, I heard his mother's voice behind us, sharp with authority. If you leave now, don't expect another invitation. The family won't be so generous with its acceptance again. I turned back one final time. Your acceptance was never generous, I said quietly. It was conditional. And my sons deserve better than conditional love. The ride back to our hotel was silent except for the gentle hum of Seoul traffic outside our windows. Back in our hotel room, the boys sat on the edge of one bed while I paced by the window, my mind racing through our options. The Seoul skyline glittered outside, beautiful and cold, like everything else in this city that had promised acceptance but delivered manipulation. Mama, Kem said quietly. Are you angry at us? I stopped pacing and looked at their worried faces. No, baby. I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at the adults who tried to use you. Tund pulled his knees up to his chest. We didn't know about the television thing being planned already. They made it sound like we had a choice. You did have a choice. You do have a choice. That's what I'm fighting for. My phone buzzed with a text message. Then another. And another. Seo-jun, please don't leave like this. Seo-jun, the boys need to understand their heritage. Seo-jun, my family is willing to compromise. I turned the phone face down without responding. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at our door. I looked through the peephole and saw Seo-jun standing in the hallway, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. Boys, go brush your teeth, I said firmly. They disappeared into the bathroom, and I opened the door just wide enough to face their father. They're not doing the interview, I said before he could speak. I know. I cancelled it. That surprised me. You did? The producers weren't happy. My mother is furious. But yes, I cancelled it. He ran his hands through his hair. Can I come in? Please? I stepped aside reluctantly. He entered and sat heavily in the chair by the window, looking older than his 32 years. I'm sorry, he said. You're right. We were using them. I was using them. Why? The question came out rawer than I intended. Because I was scared. The company is in real trouble, Chioma. Not just public relations trouble. Financial trouble. If the board loses confidence, if the stockholders panic, we could lose everything. And you thought parading your mixed-race sons on television would solve that? He flinched at my tone. I thought it would show stability. Family continuity. That despite everything, the next generation was secure. At what cost to them? I know. I see that now. He looked toward the bathroom door where we could hear the boys talking quietly. They trusted me, and I was about to exploit that trust. The boys emerged in their pajamas, moving cautiously like they weren't sure if they were welcome in their own conversation. Father? Kem said hesitantly. Are you okay? Seo Jun's face crumpled slightly. I owe you both an apology. What we planned tonight, the interview, all of it, it wasn't fair to you. Tund came closer. Were you trying to help your business? Yes, but that doesn't make it right. You're not tools to fix adult problems. You're my sons, and I should have protected you from those pressures. I watched this interaction carefully. This was the moment that would define everything, whether he truly understood what he'd done wrong. So no television? Kem asked. No television unless you specifically want to do it someday, for your own reasons. What about grandmother? Is she still angry? Seo Jun sighed. She's very angry. At me, at your mother, at this whole situation. But not at us. Tund pressed. She's disappointed that we won't be doing what she hoped. I could see him struggling to be honest without completely devastating them. It was a delicate balance. Father, Kem said seriously. Do you want us to be here? Really want us? Or do you want us to be here because it helps your business? The question hung in the air like a challenge. This 10-year-old had cut straight to the heart of everything. Seo Jun got down on his knees so he was at their eye level. I want you here because you're my sons and I love you. The business, the family pressure, all of that, it's noise. What matters is us. But you listened to the noise before, Tund pointed out with devastating accuracy. Yes, I did. And that was wrong. I found myself holding my breath, waiting to see how he would handle their questions. Whether he would make promises he couldn't keep or give them false hope. What happens now? Kem asked. Now you decide what you want to do. Your mother and I will support whatever you choose. The twins looked at each other with that silent communication they'd perfected over 10 years. We want to go home, Tund said finally. To London. But we also want you to visit us there sometimes. If that's okay with your mother, Seo Jun said, looking at me. It's okay with me if you mean it, I replied. If you're really choosing us over their approval. I am. Even if it costs you the company? He was quiet for a long moment. The company my parents built was supposed to be about family legacy. But if maintaining that legacy means sacrificing my actual family, then it's not worth preserving. The boys climbed onto his lap, and for a moment, we looked like what we'd never quite managed to be, a real family. But I knew the morning would bring consequences. His parents' anger. Corporate board meetings. Financial pressures that wouldn't disappear just because we'd made an emotional decision. There's something else, Seo Jun said quietly. Something I didn't tell you about why they were so desperate for the interview. I tensed. What? There's a scandal brewing. About me. About the company's hiring practices. About whether I've been given special treatment because I'm family. What kind of scandal? The kind that makes having acknowledged heirs look like a stabilizing influence rather than a liability. The room fell silent except for the hum of the hotel's air conditioning. So this was never really about accepting the boys, I said. It was about using them as PR shields. Initially, yes. But Chioma. He looked at our sons, who were listening with serious faces. Being with them tonight, seeing them handle all of this with such grace, it made me realize what I've been missing. What have you been missing? Kem asked. The chance to be their father instead of just someone who shares their DNA. Tund considered this. You can still be our father in London. If your mother will let me try. I looked at my sons, my brave, wise, beautiful sons who had handled more adult complexity in one evening than most children face in years. We'll try, I said finally. But in London. On our terms. No more family pressure, no more business complications, no more using them to solve adult problems. Agreed. And if your family can't accept that? Then they'll have to accept that I'm choosing my children over their expectations. The boys smiled for the first time since we'd entered that restaurant. It wasn't the ending any of us had imagined, but it was honest. 2 days later, we were back in London. Seo Jun came with us, carrying a single suitcase and a resignation letter addressed to his family's company board. Are you sure about this? I asked him as we watched the boys play in our small garden behind the house. I've never been more sure of anything. 6 months later, our kitchen smelled like a blend of Nigerian pepper soup and his mother's recipes that he was slowly learning to recreate. The boys taught him English slang while he helped them with their math homework. It wasn't perfect. His family hadn't forgiven us. The media still occasionally ran stories about the scandal that never broke. But watching Kem and Tund laugh with their father over breakfast, completely comfortable in their own skin, I knew we'd made the right choice. Sometimes the family you fight for becomes stronger than the one you inherit.